welcome everybody to Hope for Our Times. I have a very special guest in studio with me today. And by the way, tonight, both of us are going to be at Brandon Holthouse's church in Bakersfield. It's just a little while from now, about 4 hours out. Hope that you all can make it there. We'll also be live streaming that event that's going to take place tonight in Bakersfield at Rock Harbor Church. So my guest, you probably figured it out by now, in studio with me is John Howler. John, thanks for joining me.
Good to be here.
It's been a while since we've done this.
It has been. So, I mean, we both had a couple trips to Israel at least since we were here together the last time.
Yeah, no kidding. And a lot of weather events have passed too, especially for you.
Lousy, the worst winter of my life, which is getting increasingly long. Although we were with my stepfather-in-law, and he just turned 99 on Sunday.
Wow, praise the Lord. It's amazing.
Still living in his own house.
That's amazing. And you're here in the warm weather too.
Compared to Ohio, we went at least 2 weeks where it never got to zero with the wind chill.
Got up to zero. That's crazy. I don't do that.
It really was the coldest extended period I've ever had in my life.
Yeah.
So.
Well, this gives everybody an idea. I'm wearing a jacket because I'm a little cool. You're not.
No, it was 59 degrees when we left this morning to drive down here. So
that's freezing.
I know. You're kind of soft out here.
I listen, I will admit it. I like warm weather. When all that the weather events started in your area, it was back in January, and I was in Florida, and I had to fly out of Florida to get back home. And I praise God, I had no connector flight. We got a nonstop from Tampa to San Diego. It was all south. It was all sunny. It was sunny there. It was sunny when I arrived home. And
it's flights are a little bit dicey. I think the TSA is sort of going through a shutdown now, so we're wondering if we're going to have long lines at Ontario when we fly home later this week.
It is getting sketchy with TSA. All right, so
anyway,
let's go here because people love hearing from you. You're like a favorite guest here at Hope for Our Times. And so Iran, obviously, John, we talk off the record, but on the record, there's so many things that are happening. Israel, Iran, the U.S., we have all of these Sunni nations. There's a bunch of different battlegrounds. China is they're in a difficult place. They're back on their heels. Trump has made some moves that are very threatening to China even. So I want you to bring us all up to speed because you are very well informed.
Boy, I don't even know where to begin. So Iran is the big deal right now because there's an actual, I don't know if anybody's calling it a war, but it's clearly a war. And it's also very, very difficult to get information out. So I get these things popping up in my X feed. Bibi Netanyahu has been killed and Ben Gvir was killed in a missile strike on his home. And so you have to be very careful about how you're curating and collecting your news. But the best I can tell is that things have gone pretty well for the United States and Israel. I think the United States has lost 6 service people, which, given the scale of the operation, if you looked at the equipment and airplanes and ships and aircraft carriers that we've had over there, you don't want to say, well, we only lost 6, like it's not a big deal. It's a big deal for the families, but it really was only 6. Taken out Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran. Although, I did some research, in the Iranian constitution, Ali Khamenei is not technically under the Article 5 of the Iranian constitution, adopted in 1989 after Khomeini, well, it was amended in 1989 after Khomeini, the head of the revolution in 1979. It essentially appoints the supreme leader with a placeholder. The supreme leader is actually that 5-year-old kid who disappeared in a well that they believe that they can bring back by causing chaos. That's in their constitution.
Oh, so, okay, this is going to be a great update for people because most people are probably not aware of this. So we go back to the time of Ahmadinejad when he was president.
I'm mad about jihad. I used to
Or
call
I'm
it.
mad about jihad. Glenn Beck used to call him I'm a nut job.
Right.
So what, now he's dead too.
That's what I hear. Although then I saw a video that he was alive, but I think it was an old video.
Well, there's so
can't-
and
you
the other
can't
thing
figure
is,
anything
there
out.
is I'm getting friends of mine that are sending me videos thinking, did you see this? And you're going, all right, this is fake. In fact, there's just another one and it's constant fake news. But going back to this 5-year-old being put into a hole in the ground.
He went into a well in Khorasan, Iran, and they believe that he will come back. I believe he's the Mahdi. He will actually come back.
Yeah, that's what I'm a nut job used to say. This takes us back a good 15 years when all of this stuff was going on. When you first used to come out to the church sometimes and things. It was way back then. That was when, my goodness, there was David Hawking and David Reagan, and we were doing those conferences way back then. So at that time, it was the 12th Imam, the Mahdi. This guy's going to appear. We must bring death and destruction. Now, isn't that part of, some of the things we're reading is the people who believe this are thinking we are bringing this death and destruction that we need to bring in order for the Mahdi to appear.
Right, that they have to create chaos, and out of chaos, the Mahdi will come and lead this great period of Islamic control of everything. It's called Twelver Shi'ism, the 12th Imam who disappeared in a well. I think he was 5 years old, back in the 800s AD, maybe 7 or 800s AD. So they believe that they caused the chaos, he will come back. And all of the upper leadership of the Iranian government and apparatus, I've said, and then I saw Seth Frantzman, my friend at the Jerusalem Post, said recently in an interview, if you want to understand how the Iranian government is organized, watch the Godfather movie, because it's actually an organized crime family. So, for example, the new leader, Mossaba Khamenei, is, they say, the worst of all of them in terms of his dedication to Twelver Shi'ism. And so he believes they'll cause chaos. Now there's reports, and I don't know how credible the reports are, that he's been injured in a strike and he's very severely injured. And the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard, is waiting for him to expire, and then they're going to come in and take control. But they're just as bad. They may be worse because they're military people and they have a lot of military assets. So the religious side is fanatical. The IRGC is fanatical. And then this poor Przeshkin, or whatever his name is, the president, he's out there, oh, well, we're sorry for bombing you. And then they bomb more. They're bombing Arab countries. So it's very, very fluid. And so there's a lot of things that can go. I mean, there's many, many alternatives as how this thing could work out, and maybe one of them might be okay.
Okay, so it might be okay, which is interesting. So I want to get into the Abraham Accords and where you see the Sunni nations going, because this Iran war, I believe, is going to be wrapped up. I don't think it's going to drag on a long time. That's me personally. Some people are saying, of course, you listen to Tucker Carlson, we're going to be in it forever. Trump's the worst person in the world, and anybody who loves Jews are of the devil, and all these different things that are being said. But I don't think it's going to go on a long time. From my perspective, and again, you have some connections that I don't have, and I've got other ones. But from my perspective, the U.S. and Israel have got an exceptionally good handle on this. Oh, by the way, before we get to Abraham, of course, did you see Starmer the other day saying we're going to send 2 ships into the war, and Trump said, "Oh, after we've won, you can now."
Starmer is. What was this thing in the Spectator I saw? The big article was called "The End is Cure." It's a great play on words. And I have a friend in the UK, and he's just, Mark Sutherland, and he's just beside himself about what's going on in the UK government. And I interviewed Jonathan Spire, probably the best military war correspondent in the Middle East, a couple weeks ago. And he was in London. That's where he's from. He lives in Israel. But he said London has fallen to Islam. It's really that bad.
Yeah, everything I read about it is just devastating. We both have some friends over there. And Gary, if you're watching, God bless you. We'll get you on here as soon as we can, Gary McKibben.
Oh yeah, I've done some interviews with him.
So with that, John, I'm looking at things. I really don't think this is going to drag on a lot longer. But there's some huge problems. So one of them is, I want to talk about Abraham Accords, and then something else for everybody watching. I'm also going to get into this, John, because this is a big deal. We know that there has to be some type of peace that leads Israel to believing, hey, we can finally get along. And I don't know when that's going to happen, but it has to happen, which also they eventually have to come with Russia to come against Israel. So that means whatever their leadership is, it's going to have people fooled. But underneath, this is the problem that Iran really has. Who is going to be that leader or leaders? Because no matter what happens, there's still going to be people that are sympathetic to the regime. They're hardliners. They're IRGC. There's still going to be enough of them there that they may fake it for a while. But,
that is, so that passage is referencing in Ezekiel 38 as verse 11. That's one that I can't explain very well given the state of the world. How does that happen when we see what's going on? So you just opened about 40 rabbit trails in those 3 or 4 sentences.
Like I like to wind up James Cadiz, and I like to get you to go on a rabbit trail.
So I think that what happened in the Iran war that I think was maybe not expected was Iran attacking the Gulf Coast countries, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, UAE. I don't know if they've sent anything into Oman. They've actually sent a couple missiles into Turkey, trying to drag NATO in, Cyprus. And then the interesting thing is everybody says, oh, no, it's Israel bombing all those Gulf Coast countries that are in the Abraham Accords with it, because they're false flags. They want to drag everybody in.
And Tucker Carlson's Mossad is actually getting ready to bomb things.
And he comes out and he says, yeah, the Mossad is getting ready. They were arrested in the UAE, and the UAE comes out and says, we didn't arrest anybody. Oh, in Qatar. He said in Qatar they arrested Mossad people. And he's totally unhinged. We can talk a little bit about that. But so back to the Gulf Coast countries, that's an interesting component that I don't think a lot of people figured out. So in the UAE, they've actually received more drone and missile attacks than Israel has. They attacked a couple of drones hit the UAE, the airport in Dubai, which is, I believe, the busiest airport in the world. People in Dubai, they come to live in this great, peaceful, prosperous, luxury resort type apartment buildings and beaches and restaurants. And I've seen a lot of people on social media. I've been here forever. I'm leaving. I'm never coming back because I can't tolerate this. And so I saw a picture at the airport when they finally started to open it the other day. It was wall-to-wall people in this giant airport. So that's an interesting component. Saudi Arabia has been attacked. They've hit at least one oil facility, which is similar to the attack back in, it's one of these things that you can't remember. It was like 4 years ago, so it seems like it's 12 years ago now. But the Houthis and the Iranians had attacked a major oil refinery, the largest oil refinery in the world. And then that was brought back online. So I don't even remember when that was. But
that sounds right, about 4 years ago.
But the interesting thing is that now the Abraham Accords, and then you have to watch Jared Kushner, who is the pivot point of the Abraham Accords. He has an Abraham Accords Institute, of course. And Trump has said, I don't do anything in the Middle East without consulting Jared, who's really not a government employee.
No, he's a businessman. And Witkoff, your friend Witkoff.
We think he's just a businessman. I do think that there might be more going on there for him in this end times role. And then Witkoff, I don't think he knows what he's doing because he came back after negotiating with the Iranians and said, we have all this firepower there, and they're acting like, what's the big deal? We're going to do what we want to do anyway. We don't need to do anything with you. because he doesn't understand how the Iranians negotiate. I had an attorney years ago, great lawyer. He was on the other side of a case, and he said his hobby, somehow the Middle East came up. This is 25 years ago. And he said, well, my hobby is buying Persian rugs. And he said, if you've ever negotiated a price on a Persian rug with a true Persian dealer, you're not even sure when you've got it in the trunk of your car that the price you paid is what you're going to pay. It's never a done deal. And that's how they negotiate. And they start off with, they act like nothing has happened, that no attacks have been made, that there's no military forces there. The interesting thing about the Abraham Accords, though, which I think relates to Ezekiel 38, is that the Gulf Coast countries, some of which have been kind of hanging out on the fringes of normalizing things with Israel, like Saudi Arabia, this is, I think, pushing them in that direction. You know, in the ancient past of like 2 weeks ago, before this started, Saudi Arabia was saying, don't use our airspace, you can't use our airspace, you can't use bases here. And then, like within minutes after everything started and a missile started coming from Iran into Saudi Arabia, they said, we support everything that's going on. Now, they never mentioned Israel or the United States, but they just said the Iranians are out of line. And so this has been true with respect to the Gulf Coast countries. So that seems to be pushing that way. One thing that's still hanging out there that nobody's talking about right now because it's like completely forgotten is Gaza. That's not done. I mean, I've been looking at, Honest Reporting has a great graphic on their website about the different tunnels in Gaza. They've only mapped like 40 miles of 400 to 800, 400 to 800 miles.
Wow.
I don't know how they deal with that problem. And I think the Honest Reporting people are actually correlating schools, mosques, and that type of thing with tunnel entrances. There are tunnel entrances everywhere. So that's why Israel's had to destroy a lot of Gaza. But that's, you know, the Board of Peace is in place. And then Trump comes out and says, well, if there's a new ruler in Iran, I get to appoint him.
Well, yeah, in fact, he said just a few days ago he's not necessarily going to support Reza Pahlavi. And so when you look at the dynamic with what's happening, we know there's going to be a leader that's going to convey peace, but you brought up a lot of points, a lot more possible rabbit trails, by the way.
By the way, in Iran, there's a huge Arab section, Arab tribes. I mean, Iran is multi-ethnic, a lot of different tribes, and tribal identification is probably even more important in many cases than religion in the Middle East. We don't understand that mentality, although people are trying to make us very tribal here in the United States. But the Arab groups, tribes, joined together and came out and said, we would support Pahlavi coming back as a new Shah, or at least a head of a temporary government.
So something is going to happen. I think we're going to know in the not too distant future. All right, so you bring up Gaza. We still have to talk about Judea and Samaria, because when we look at the scenario from Ezekiel 38, verse 11, Israel has to be in this place of peace, shakat, not just shalom, but they got to be in that peaceful place, which we've talked about before. So you have Gaza, you have the Abraham Accords, which you still need, we have a lot more to work out here. Judea and Samaria are a problem. You bring up the tribal issues. That is still happening in Judea and Samaria. So Israel knows there's, within the tribal communities, within the Arab communities, there's some that are favorable to Israel.
Down around Hebron, some of the
yes,
tribes down there have come out and
exactly.
said,
In fact,
we don't want anything to do with the Palestinian Authority.
Yeah, they don't even want anything to do with PLO, not even mentioning Hamas or anything. Okay, so as we work through this, I think we are going to see hyperspeed on Abraham Accords coming out of this, because this is, Trump, you and I both said, this takes us back before Trump was elected, was a year and a half ago now, both said when Trump gets in office, day one, it's going to be about Abraham Accords, and it has been. I think it was the very first day he comes into office. It was Abraham Accord. So it's going to press forward, and it seems to me everything going on with Iran and the missiles flying. I mean, drones hitting the Burj Khalifa. I mean, drones hit their targets.
Right.
So it's rather obvious Iran had these targets.
I just saw a drone fly into a big residential building in Bahrain. And Bahrain's an interesting, it's sort of this island peninsula off Saudi Arabia, oil rich, but it's a Sunni leadership, but Shia people. So that could cause a lot of unrest. And the oil producing regions of Saudi Arabia are Shia, largely Shia Islam also. So I do think, I'm just not sure how to analyze this from a Bible standpoint, but I have a friend I communicate with who has suggested that the Psalm 83 alliance, we talk about that as a future, is it not future, but if you look at the nations identified there, it's all the nations that are kind of being brought into the Abraham Accords. The only ones that are sort of hanging out there right now are the area of Syria, Iraq, and Lebanon. But look at what's happening in Lebanon. Hezbollah has been launching rockets into northern Israel from Hezbollah in Lebanon. And the Lebanese government now has come out and said, they're banning Hezbollah. Yeah. Everybody's authorized to take out Hezbollah. We're all for them being completely dismantled. And even up in the Bekaa Valley, some of the Hezbollah militias have said, we're not going to participate in going against Israel. And I think they know that. In some respects, they're dedicated Islamists, but they're also pragmatic, that if we do this, Israel's going to do something to us. So Israel, I believe there's going to be a very large land invasion into Lebanon.
Which has already begun.
It's already begun, but it's going to extend beyond the end of what's going on with Iran.
Yeah, I would guess, John, you could comment on this, but it seems to me that the Lebanese government obviously doesn't want the Hezbollah problem. They're green-lighting Israel to come in on foot. Now, you mentioned Psalm 83. This is fascinating to me because we both have friends that absolutely say Psalm 83, Isaiah 17, the destruction of Damascus, Jeremiah 49 are all past, or you can't even look at them yet. There's others that we know, Bill Salas and others, that say, no, all three of those are still future, or are they going on now? Okay, so with that, what's interesting, in all of those people groups and land areas, every single one of them happen to be in play right now. Iran, what will happen with Damascus? What about the Psalm 83 people groups? Mm-hmm. And even if you believe those things are future, or if you believe they're all past, or an imprecatory prayer, Psalm 83, regardless of what your thought is on that, it's rather interesting that every single one of these are in play. And we do know, again, it will get to that time of peace that's coming.
So when I was in Israel in late 2022, I actually went to an Orthodox Jewish, hardcore Zionist family for Shabbat. And during the Shabbat, it came up, the Abraham Accords came up, oh, this is great, that's going to result in a lot of money and benefits. And I said, don't trust it at all, because if I look at the nations in Psalm 83, they're cunning. They're trying to devise a way. So eventually, it may look great now, but they will turn. I think that's the problem. But, so I was at Metula in November at the Lebanon border. You could see the UNIFIL things there around the fence and everything, and you could see the homes that were destroyed and the roofs destroyed by Hezbollah rockets after October 7th. And it was still about 90% unoccupied. The people had not returned to Metula. Now they're being attacked again. And how do you live with that? So Israel's saying, we're going to go to the Litani River. So that's we think of, it's not a river, it's a creek. But it's a little bit of a valley. But when you're in Metula, the Litani River is, I don't think it's 2 miles away from the border.
Mm-hmm.
So these things are very, very close. So for example, they get these warnings all the time about missiles or rockets or drones coming in along the Gaza envelope and in northern Israel. They've got like 10 seconds to get to a shelter once the warning gets off. It's very, very close. So Israel's been clearing out, told everybody get out of this region up to the Litani River. They've also told 400,000 people in Beirut to get out because they're going to do something in Beirut. Now, we don't know what that is, but it's interesting.
That's 400,000 people.
The reports, and it's, Lebanon's only a country of 4 million, maybe 3 or 4 million. But so these villages are being evacuated and they're being used as shields. They're Christian villages. We saw just yesterday or a day before, Hezbollah had set up by a Christian church, and Israel came in to attack it, and a Christian priest, I don't know if he was Maronite or Orthodox, was killed in the attack. And of course now they say, oh, look, Candace and all these people, oh, look, Israel's targeting Christians. And it's, no, they're being used as shields. But the people that evacuated from there, Shiites that evacuated, Hezbollah people, they're going in further into Lebanon and nobody wants them. And it's kind of an interesting dynamic because within the last 24 hours, as we're recording this, Al-Shara, or there's a commentator that I really like at I-24, Ruth Wasserman-Land. I was supposed to interview her last week, but a little thing, and war intervened, and she lives in Jerusalem, so she has to kind of want to spend time in the bomb shelter with her family, I guess. But she calls him Al-Sharia, which I think is a great name because he's a radical Islamist jihadist. But even he came out and said, we are organizing to get rid of the Shia militias in Syria, and we may even cross the borders into Lebanon. So you might see some cooperation between Israel and the new Syrian government to neutralize these Shia rebels, because the Sunnis in charge of Syria now, they don't like the Shias. That was a ally of the Assad regime, so they want to eradicate that from their society. It's very interesting. So the wild card in all of this is, so we have the Gulf Coast Sunni countries seem to be leaning towards Israel now. And we even have Syria sort of leaning towards Israel, but then there's this wild card of Turkey. So when we're together in Las Vegas, probably in a week or so, I'm going to be talking about Turkey in at least one or two of my talks. Erdogan has been very clever. He turned 72 a couple weeks ago. I read this morning, I think it was in the Times of London, that the person that was going to oppose him in the election coming up, or oppose whoever he will want to succeed him, is now facing, I believe it's 200,000 years in prison for bribery charges. So this is it just happened to come up right now. So Erdogan's getting rid of his opponents, which he's done ever since he's come to power. So Syria is a big deal, and there are some intel reports and a lot of analysts and Israel security analysts that are concerned that if Iran becomes weak, Syria is going to move in to take effective control. Now, I don't think that has any impact on the Persia aspect of Ezekiel 38, 39, because what the scripture doesn't tell, it tells us about this region. I don't know that it has to be ethnic region, but when Ezekiel writes it, he looks and says, oh, the people over there in the end times, or the people here in the end times, Turkey, and so now we know these are all Islamists. But the diminishment of Persia, or maybe Persia coming under control of Turkey in an Ottoman Empire kind of way, I don't think changes anything about Ezekiel 38 and 39. It still makes it as something that's definitely in play.
It is, and I want to come back to this in a second, but just to remind everybody, John and I will be joining Pastor Brent Holthouse tonight in Bakersfield, and also if you're not anywhere near Bakersfield, California, it will be live streamed. So be sure that you tune in if you can't make it there in person. But we look forward to meeting you. It's going to be a great night. We'll be in Vegas together the following weekend. Also, it's going to be fantastic. And I think you're going to be, that's not till the summer when we're with Mike Spalding in your neck of the woods in Ohio.
In Ohio.
Okay, so let me
go. It will actually be warm, so you can.
I can. That's
you
why.
don't have to
that's why I agreed to Mike.
Okay,
I'll come in the summer. Okay, so it's interesting you mentioned this. You get the Sunni, Shiite, the whole issue, fighting with each other, which you mentioned with, what's his name, Al-Jalani, Al-Sharia, whatever his name is.
Al-Shara, yeah.
Al-Shara. You got all these different Sharia, which is another story. But you have the book of Genesis with the sons of Ishmael be a wild donkey fighting against his own brother and pretty much fighting against everyone. This is exactly what we see.
That prophecy seems to be pretty accurate.
Yes, it does. Okay, now here's something else that's interesting, and we still haven't talked about Gaza yet. So I'm going to throw something in there and have you work it out in a second. But when we look at Israel, if you go back in ancient history, biblical history, when they were doing right before the Lord, God would give them victory. And we know they started having serious losses in war as you look at the northern kingdom, and then even Judah when Babylon was coming against them. When they turned against the Lord, God made sure they lost their battles. What's interesting right now, they're still not in a place of repentance. Ezekiel chapter 36 is very clear, a prerequisite for Israel to come back into the land.
In unbelief.
They come back in unbelief before they turn to the Lord, Yeshua. But yet, they keep having victory, which is also a reminder of certain, as you look at the Bible, you go, wait a minute, Israel starts having victories in the last days, even though they have not yet turned to the Lord. So you look at where we are right now, you go, past history shows Israel not having victory when they're not walking, when they haven't turned to the Lord. So, but yet they are having these victories. I find this very fascinating, another indicator that they keep having victory after victory. And there's these reports that are coming out, and I'm sure you've seen them, that there's things that have been done in Iran that make the pager operations seem...
I don't know what that's going to be, but I'm hearing reports, and after watching the pager thing, which seems like it was a really, really long, it was like a year and a half ago. You know, not even a year and a half ago was when those pager attacks happened that decimated upper parts of Hezbollah. They took out Nasrallah, they took out Hania. But now they're saying that what they're going to do may surpass that.
So, well, this is what just reading today and yesterday.
In Iran.
Is we probably can talk about this at Brandon's tonight, but they're saying it's not coming out yet. But after this is over, we're going to hear about all sorts of things that are done that are even more profound, more amazing than the pager instance. So I find Israel having these victories. I'm like, it is interesting to me. For me, I think it's another indicator when I look at the Bible of what's going to take place during the time leading up to the end.
Well, it's kind of interesting that these victories create a great confidence on the part of Israel. But we also know that there's this thing called the abomination of desolation that's coming. And when that happens, they're told to flee. And there will be a very severe military oppression. And, you know, and we can argue about when Ezekiel 38:39 comes. I happen to think it's later, but I don't know that it's, let's just pay attention to see. We see everything coming together for that. But I think there are other wars and other things that are in the interim before we get there.
We may be experiencing some of those other things right now, or in the beginning of some of those things.
So let me just say something about Turkey, and I'm sure we'll share this with Brandon's a little bit more detail. And I will talk about it, but very interesting. On the 1-year anniversary of the fall of Damascus, Ruth Land was on I-24, and she said, I think there is no longer a Syria. It's a facade. It's really Turkey. And you remember when Erdogan's with Trump, whether you like him or not, there's sort of an entertainment factor there that he's trolling Erdogan while he's sitting there in the Oval Office. Hey, that was really cool what you did there with Syria. I know you'll deny and everything, but we know you did it. You know you did it. And he did. That was a complete Turkish operation. A couple weeks later, David Wormser, a good security analyst, I think he lives in Israel now, he said that what happened on December 8th, 2024 was incredibly significant. It was a geopolitical religious earthquake in the Sunni world, because the biggest Sunni dynasty lasted about 100 years, the Umayyad dynasty. It only lasted 100 years, and in Sunni Islamic thought, it only lasts that long because we got away from our religious roots. We weren't pious enough. We weren't committed enough to Islam. But he said for the first time in over 1,000 years, Sunni Islam got back their geopolitical and religious capital of Damascus in December of 2024. That's very significant. So we can argue, okay, is Damascus, Isaiah 17, is it past, future? Okay, let's just say maybe it's future. So if it's future, it would seem that Damascus is kind of an important place in the world that exists at that time. And I'm just suggesting to you, Damascus is a very important place in the world that exists that we live in right now. And you look at a very well-respected security analyst that says, this is a geopolitical religious earthquake that happened on December 8th, 2024. And we're living right in the middle of this, and it's a little bit hard to kind of put all of that into perspective. And so what they believe now is they believe that because they're becoming more pious Sunni Islamists, they're going to be getting back their territory. And the Umayyad dynasty, based in Syria, in Damascus, controlled Persia back during the Umayyad dynasty.
Okay, so it was only 3 weeks after that, December 8, 2024, that Erdogan's son has the parade. Wasn't it New Year's Day, 2025?
It was, yeah, at the
So just 3 weeks
Galata
later.
Bridge in Istanbul.
Yeah.
And he had the big poster. I've used it about 1,000 times. It's not a poster to come to the rally. It's a summary of their battle plan. And so it says, yesterday, Hagia Sophia, and I've got the video of Erdogan dedicating Hagia Sophia as a mosque in 2020. And the largest church ever built in Christianity. Now, we can argue about Orthodox doctrine and everything, whether it's right or anything, but to a Sunni, that's a Christian church. They've taken it over. That was a religious earthquake. So then he said, today, January 1st, 2025, today, Damascus, Umayyad, and then tomorrow, Al-Aqsa. And you know from our friends like Roddy and other people in Jerusalem, the Turks are all over Jerusalem. And they come and they say things like, this is ours and we're coming back to get it.
Yeah, in fact, shout out to Roddy. Hey, thanks for all you're doing. We are praying for you and Sheila and the rest of our friends there in Israel, Jew and Arab alike.
By the way, when I was there for I don't know if it was the tour, I stayed at Christchurch for a few nights after the media summit. And at one point, Rodney just says, hey, are you claustrophobic? Come with me. And you've probably been up there. He takes me to that spiral staircase.
That's a narrow.
It's 14 inch. I measured with my foot. It's about 14 inches wide, and you can't figure out where you are.
I can't believe you. That is. I mean, I'm not a big guy, right?
Yeah.
And I'm going up there thinking, oh man, this is tight.
Did Craig go up?
No way. There's no possible way Craig could
because
go up
they how do they even get the jaws of life in there to extract you And I kept thinking, like, if I fall, I'm not going to go very far because
you can't go far into that.
If I just turn sideways,
stuck.
I'm wider than the.
It'd be like Winnie the Pooh. Before you be able to get out of
like
it.
Like a bottle, like a cork in a bottle, or a ship in a bottle.
But it's amazing when you get up there. I mean, not everybody can go up there. It's a private thing, but it is really an amazing view to be up there. All right. With that, and I'm supposed to be there again in about 4 weeks. I can't wait to be back there in Jerusalem. We have a group that's coming in 5 weeks, Lord willing, which I believe is going to happen. Okay, let's go to Gaza, because no news is really coming out of Gaza. You know, we've been part of a group text, you and I, with our friends David and a couple other guys, Olivier and I think Rob. And as we look at Gaza. No news is coming out there. This is how I think. In fact, it was Roddy who asked me. And I said, this is what I think is happening, Roddy. I said, while everybody is looking, all the media it's got its attention on Iran and everything else. The Israelis are not stupid. They've got a Gaza problem. And I know some guys that are in Gaza, I'm sure you do too, that are still in Gaza. They're not like, they didn't all pull out of Gaza and go up north. They're still there, and I'm pretty sure they're probably doing some things that are necessary to do while nobody's looking too.
Well, the other thing about Gaza, the solution to Gaza is get everybody out of there. I mean, I hate to say that.
It is,
but
yeah, it is.
But also, that's why Turkey is sort of aligned with the Shia Twelver regime. They don't agree with them theologically. Well, they all believe there's a Mahdi coming, but just different theological bases. But so Turkey's sort of supporting the Iranian regime, not because they like them, because when the Assad regime fell, millions of Syrians went into Turkey and caused a lot of economic hardship. Now they're sending them back. That's why Erdogan helped al-Shara, because he wanted to get rid of these refugee camps. But now the concern is if Iran melts down, there's going to be the Syria refugee problem was in a country of, at the time, 23 million people. Iran is 4 times larger. So can you imagine what the refugee problem will be like? And I don't know what percentage of Iran is Christian. I know a lot of Christians that have left and come to places like America and the UK. Although I don't know that the UK is really the best place, to flee to
did a
right
while
now.
back.
But anyway, that's going to be a massive problem, and Turkey's trying to avoid that. So there seems to be some soft agreement. When al-Shara came to the White House in early November to meet with Trump, who was sitting right there in the room with him? The foreign minister of Turkey, Hakan Fidan, was the head of the intelligence services in Turkey, the equivalent of the Mossad, not as effective as the Mossad, but he's the foreign minister now. And on his X account, he's got this big picture of the world, and Turkey's like expanded way out over Europe. And they're talking about expanding into Europe. They want to recreate, they don't really want the Ottoman Caliphate. I think they want a global caliphate that they think Erdogan's going to, or whoever's head of Turkey will lead.
So let me ask you another question. Gaza, Lebanon, Iran, Syria, we see all of the Gulf states. We see, I mean, it's kind of like you can't make this up, because everything is happening that the Bible indicates this is going to be the area, these are going to be the people groups before the tribulation begins and so forth. And we look at this, it's to me, it's not a coincidence. I think you would say the same thing. How it all works out, God doesn't tell us the how. Sometimes I think in the prophecy world, people want to know, but what's the next step? Or God doesn't tell us that. He tells us what the end's going to be. He gives us the signposts so we can see this nation, this people group, this land, and we can put things together. But we don't always know how. Okay, with that, we still got to look at Judea and Samaria. You look at this, you have Hebron there, or Hebron, whichever way you want to call it. You have the tomb of the patriarchs. You have that dynamic. You have Samaria, you have Shechem. You have these places that are absolutely monumental in the history of Israel and the Jews.
Judea and Samaria is the biblical heartland. And as a big supporter of Israel and a Christian, because the biblical heartland is the biblical heartland for me too, I find the whole thing to be scandalous in a way, because everywhere you go, as you're entering Judea and Samaria, there's a big red sign, entry by Israelis is forbidden.
Yep.
Now, I've been to Shechem. My tour, we went to Jacob's Altar. To get to Jacob's Altar on Mount Ebal, we had to go in We joined up with a couple.
Joshua's altar, or
Joshua, I'm sorry, Joshua's altar. I'm sorry.
but you got Jacob's wells
Jacob's
there.
well, yeah. Joshua's altar on Mount Ebal, and we joined up with like Israel 365 and another Orthodox Aaron Lipkin's group, and we had to get a bulletproof window bus and an IDF escort. And as where you park to walk out to Joshua's altar is it's a very rough walk. I mean, it's very rough terrain. I don't know how these people walked all over Israel in that terrain with sandals on. You know, I've got these upgraded shoes,
it's
and I'm
a tough
like,
walk, and it gets hot there.
but
hot.
I've got drones flying, like tracking me for a couple hundred yards. This drone flying like right here, you know, just a little bit above my head, because it's a bad security situation. And I've been to Shechem with Joel Kramer. Pam and I went there, and you talk to Israeli people, you know, Jewish people in Israel, and they're like, "Are you out of your mind? You went to Shechem? Did you have an escort?" "No, we just drove a car in." But it's dangerous, and it's probably even more dangerous now. And that's the biblical heartland, and it's such an important part of the Bible story. It's hard for tourists to go in there. I mean, it cost us a lot of money just to do that day. But that whole area is full of terror cells. And they're concerned, you know, you stand there in a frat. I have to say this. So we go to a frat for Shabbat, and we're there at Solomon's Pools. I think you've probably been there.
Solomon's Pools it's a sight to see for anybody who can get there.
It's part of the water system for the
amazing
first and second temples, which was on the Temple Mount. That's where all the cisterns are. Stop with this.
Yes, it was. The water was there.
The water went to the Temple Mount.
And wait, can I interrupt here real quick? So here's the thing. For anybody out there who thinks the temple was not on the Temple Mount, the water was there. There was so much water on the Temple Mount, and there still is water there. Solomon's Pools are absolutely amazing. Probably built by Herod. People aren't real sure if it was built prior to Herod, but regardless, the aqueduct system is there, took it all to the upper city of Jerusalem. And if you have any doubts, go to the museum with Roddy Harrell at Christ Church. He will take you to the actual model that was done by, what's his name? The German.
Conrad Schick.
Conrad Schick. And you will see it and you go, oh my, all this water was there. So believe me, it's unbelievable. So
and one more.
Yeah.
The Pool of Siloam, a giant mikveh, is being uncovered. I was there 3 years ago, and then I was there just in October, November.
The last year has been like, wow.
And it's like huge, but there's a pilgrimage road that goes up through the city of David to the Temple Mount.
You did that.
Nobody's going to build a pilgrimage road to the Temple Mount to a Roman fortress. It doesn't make any sense.
No, in fact, it was just recently, and this isn't on YouTube videos yet. I don't know why they're not doing it. But Roddy was pointing out, because we did it with Ellie Shukron, I think you did too.
I did too.
So you walk up there, but there's actually the real road. It veers to the right and takes you to the southern steps.
Which
why would you do that unless it's?
And they're in the area of the southern steps, because I went down there with Roddy, just Roddy and I and his wife one day. It's like, these are Solomon's walls, Solomon's palace, all that stuff between the city of David and the southern steps. And then you see the gates, and then you take the Western Wall tunnel tours. They're not building all of that stuff for a Roman fort. No ruler worth his salt would be. It's like the Pentagon on steroids, I guess. I mean, they're just not going to do that. So that's not where it is. But all of this stuff is really in play. But the concern in Efrat, I was talking to this guy. Everybody's got a gun in either on their hip or an AK-47 or something. And I said, "What do you do?" He says, "I'm a lawyer." "Oh, I'm a lawyer too." He goes, "I want to show you my house. I see you looking at my gun. I'll show you why I have a gun." So here's Efrat, Solomon's Pools, and here's the southern part of Bethlehem. All these new apartments there. I got to say something about that. And he says, "Look at the front of my house here. Look at all those bullet marks. That's why that's why everybody here carries a gun, because they shoot at us." And then in the southern part of Bethlehem, and you see all these Arab villages, Nablus, all these places, all these new apartment buildings. So we went to Shabbat dinner, we came out at night to get on our bus, and you look at these new apartment buildings. This is true everywhere we went. Nablus, Shiloh, everywhere, and in Bethlehem, there's not a single light on in any window. You look back at the community of Efrat on a Shabbat, there's lights all over the place in the windows. Nothing in those buildings. What are they? They're fake.
And they're all over. They're also all over Shem or Shechem. Same
Correct.
thing
In
down in the
Nablus,
valley
that's
below,
right.
where the two valleys, Ebal and Gerizim, come together.
And what's interesting in Nablus, right next to Shechem and Joseph's tomb, is Balata, a big refugee camp that's a really lousy place. All these new apartment buildings, and they still make people live there.
Yeah.
It's all a political propaganda operation.
It is, and it's also establishing this is our territory. We build here, therefore. So when the Jews are accused of building on their own land, this is exactly what is happening with the Muslim community. Now, again, if we go back to what we mentioned earlier, you do have the tribal groups that are not necessarily in favor of all what the PLO is doing, but the PLO is the strong arm, and you're going to get beaten, you're going to get shut down, or whatever.
Abbas has called for elections, not for his office. Okay, he's currently serving, I think, the 21st or 22nd year of his term, that he was 4-year term that he was elected to in 2005 or 6. And he lives in a $17 million home in Ramallah. He has a $60 million jet, really suffering. I personally think the population statistics about Arabs in those areas are wildly overstated. And they state that they're more because they don't want Israel to take over that part. Well, you have to absorb all those people and you'll never have a Jewish-oriented government. I think it's a complete psychological operation. But Caroline Glick wrote a great book on that. But I'm telling you, there is concern in Efrat. I've talked to friends there. They've been attacked over the years since 1948. There have been massacres that took place in Hebron in 1929 and Gush Etzion in 1948. And the communities always came back, and usually it was led by strong Jewish women who said, no, we belong in this land to raise our children here. So I did an interview recently with a wonderful lady, Eliana Passatin. She is a mother of 8. She and her husband made Aliyah from the United States, and they decided they wanted to live in a house that overlooked the site of the tabernacle in Shiloh. Nobody was living there. They didn't have water for a couple of years. They're raising young families. And she said, and when we built our house, it's one of the most fascinating interviews I've ever done. It's on our YouTube channel. She said, we were discovering pottery. And we analyzed the pottery, and it came from the time of the tabernacle.
Wow.
And so we wanted to, because what they would do, they would something on Shabbat or whatever, they would break their dishes. They're the broken dishes. She said, now you can come to my house for Shabbat, just don't break the dishes. But, and she talks about Hannah's prayer, which really was like one of the first prayers in the Bible when she prayed for a son. And Samuel came, and there was corruption in the system, and Samuel kind of took care of some of that. Remember, he confronted
I remember it well, yeah.
Agag, the king of the Amalekites. What's it say?
When Saul was supposed to take him out.
Samuel
did. Samuel did. He hacked him up into pieces.
Hacked him to pieces
Saul
before the Lord at Gilgal.
Yeah. So I mean, you look at this. So to me, John, this is exciting. You and I both love Israel. We get it. We get the biblical. We get it. And to be there, to build your house in a place like that, and to think Hannah's right there, and to go there too.
Shiloh you can get to.
Shiloh you can get to now. In fact, if you're with me coming up in April, we're going to try and get there for on one of our days as we're in the area of Jerusalem. We'll see what we can do. But it's so exciting. But okay, by the way, don't forget, in just a little while, just a few hours from now, we'll be in Bakersfield, John and myself, joining Pastor Brandon Holthouse. And if you would like, subscribe, and share this with all of your friends too. It's just great having John back in studio with me. Okay, John, when are you going back to Israel?
I have a tour scheduled at Sukkot this year, September, October. If you want information on that, go to fbchapel.com, and right at the top of the page it says John Haller Israel Tour. Click on that, and then click on the big red square on the page that comes up, and you'll get the brochure.
I will see you there. We will be there during Sukkot. In fact, we're going to be there for a month. And also Brandon Holthouse and Olivier and myself, we have that tour and conference coming up at the towards the end of October too.
And I think the media summit's going to be sometime in that time frame. So like I did last year, I came home and went back, which is kind of an interesting way to do things. I went home for like 10 days, but it's such an incredible time to be there at Sukkot. Were you there?
I've been there. Yeah. In fact, we were really blessed. We were there, not this last Sukkot. We came like the day after this last time. The year before, we were there for almost the entire time of Sukkot. In fact, we were there the first or second night. We went to Hillel Newman's, the former consul who's now the ambassador to Australia. Went to his house. He's lived near Tel Aviv. It was great. It was fantastic.
So
the whole family.
Can I just tell you what we did when we flew in on Sukkot, and it was great. No traffic going to Jerusalem. It was like the parting of the Red Sea must have been a miracle like that. But we went down to the Gaza envelope. I talked to on one of the trips down there. I talked to the first responder there. Spent some time with Jerome Kedar, who I think you might know, did that I Am Israel film with the Israel guys. Yeah. And it's such a oppressive thing to see what happened there on October 7th, 2023. We went back to Jerusalem, and they said, okay, we're walking over to the city of David. They don't tell you that it's like an 80-story up and 80-story down elevation change from our hotel. And we went to the city of David to a thing called Alleluia. It's about the life of Nehemiah. It's a laser light show projected on the wall of Nehemiah. So we are there at Sukkot, the Feast of Booths, and you open Nehemiah chapter 8.
That's so
and it
cool.
says,
wow.
And they built booths which they had not done since the times of Joshua. And while we were doing all this, they're finalizing the final hostages being released. Trump intervened on that and did a great job. It said they had not done those since the time of Joshua. And it talked about the captives had returned from Babylon, and there was great rejoicing in the city. And I'm telling you, I'm sitting there in Jerusalem watching the celebrations of people that the captives have been released during the Feast of Booths, during Sukkot.
It
was a very biblical moment.
No, that is so cool.
By the way, that was not planned.
No, you can't plan. I mean, that is just absolutely so cool. Praise the Lord. And John, it's been great having you here today.
Great having you.
We're going to be in Bakersfield in just a couple hours. Join us there if you can. If not, we're still live streaming. Anything else you want to say to everybody? Go ahead.
Boy, pay attention. Be very careful what news sources you rely on and people. I'm going to tell you flat out, you cannot trust Tucker, Candace, or anybody like that. They are complete propaganda ops. And I've been posting on my Facebook page a great article about how the Russians are involved in this with Alexander Dugin, Insurrection Barbie, which is one of the greatest Twitter account names I've ever seen. She's doing tremendous work, as are others, to expose what's really behind this stuff. And you're going to find that there's clear attachments or connections to the occult, Aleister Crowley, and mysticism, and you need to understand that that's what's going on.
Yeah, well, here's what's funny about that. Tucker Carlson said just the other day that if you're a Christian Zionist, you're under a spell. Well,
that Mike Huckabee is doing witchcraft or something.
Yeah, and we can go and talk about somebody being under a spell. Anyways, it was great having John in studio with me today. Join us in just a little while in Bakersfield. If you can't, it will be live streamed. God bless you, everybody. See you next time.